Hey there, this is Mike from Hummingbot, and here is another video in the Hummingbot 2.1 series, which walks you through how to create different types of algo trading strategies using the latest version of Hummingbot. Just to explain, Hummingbot's an open source framework that helps you build different types of algo trading strategies like market making and arbitrage. We started about 5 years ago as a fairly simple CLI tool, and today it's more of a comprehensive framework with not just command line, but also an open source web app that helps you backtest and then deploy strategies. And the reason why people use it is because it's just software you download from the internet. You plug in your keys and you run it, and so it doesn't store anything in the cloud, and everything you run is private to your device. So, and of course, over the years, it's gotten more usage. So these are the current numbers. In the past month, we've seen about 3 billion of usage across different exchanges. And one of the main reasons why people use it is because it standardizes API integrations with all the top exchanges in crypto. We are supported by our top exchange partners. So if you download Hummingbot and you use the referral code, both you and us will get a small portion of your fees paid by the exchange at no cost to you. And before we get started, I also want to mention that we also have an educational component to Hummingbot, which is called BotCamp. We teach courses on how to apply the Hummingbot framework and run various types of algo trading strategies. We teach both the theory and the practice of algo trading, and there's two types of offerings: pre-recorded courses, as well as live online kind of like comprehensive cohorts. We've done 10 cohorts already, and we'll be publishing the schedule for cohorts 11 and 12 very soon. All right, so let's get started and talk about directional strategies and writing them in Hummingbot. First, Hummingbot originally was really designed for market making, but we really quickly realized that because Hummingbot is an engine, it can be used to basically process any type of strategy. So we created the directional framework last year, and the way it works is that Hummingbot, because it's an open source tool, it can interact directly with the exchange APIs and fetch OHLCV candles from the exchanges. Only certain exchanges have API endpoints to support this, and so if you look in the data feeds folder, you'll see the candles feeds and which exchanges support them. So for the supported exchanges, and we do support the top exchanges like Binance and OKX, as well as our partners like HyperLiquid, you can fetch the data and then construct a indicator based on this rolling window of data. The indicator are typically some type of technical indicator like RSI or MACD. And because we're using the Pandas TA technical indicator library, you can also customize it to use any indicator supported by the library, or you can add your own custom indicator. So once you've calculated the indicator, then you can generate a signal from that indicator. Typically in Hummingbot, is usually a +1 to go long or a -1 to go short. So and then the strategy will essentially look for the signal to determine if it should enter into a long position or it should enter into a short position. And typically these are kind of a trend following or mean reversion strategies where the signal is an indicator that there's some type of market condition. Perhaps the market's overbought or oversold, or perhaps there's kind of like some type of entry point which is ideal. So what you're looking for is you're trying to program into the bot the ability to detect these kind of like ideal entry points for long and short positions. After you enter into the position, you still need to figure out when to close it. So in order to make this simple for users, this is actually why we've created the position executor. So before we go into strategy, let me take a bit of a brief digression and explain how the position executor works. So we created the position executor because we saw the need to, number one, create strategies that could run on both spot and perpetual exchanges. And number two, create a way that allows people to do backtesting and essentially create a framework that allows you to use historical data to determine and how to use that in backtesting. So the way it works is that the concept really comes from the book by Martin Lopez de Prado called Advances in Financial Machine Learning. And the idea is that for every entry point, you can draw a box around the price, and where the upper bound is the take profit level, the lower bound is the stop loss level, and then the end of the box is kind of like the time limit for the trade. And so if you enter into a position, if you draw this box and you kind of define these levels, and if it hits this level, you sell, take profit. If it hits this level, you sell to take the stop loss. And if it hits the time limit, you basically buy or sell to reverse the trade and close out the position. And so because you actually need to do this for perpetual futures exchanges in order to actually monetize your long and short positions, we believe that this framework is a really useful addition to Hummingbot because it allows the user to kind of program and take advantage of this risk management logic without having to write it beforehand. So just to summarize, the way the directional strategy works is that you're fetching data from the exchange, a rolling window of data that you're going to use to calculate a signal. And then if the signal is +1, you go long. If it's -1, you go short. And once the position's been created, a position executor for each filled position is created, and then the executor will take profit, stop loss, and then also close out the position when the time limit is hit. So this framework, what the advantage is now, we can apply this to multiple exchanges, and the same strategy will run on multiple exchanges. And in addition, we can also backtest these strategies using the data we fetch from those exchanges. So now that we understand how the Hummingbot directional strategy framework works, let's see it in action. All right, so we're going to run a directional strategy two different ways. First, using a script, which is a simple file that defines all the logic of the strategy, and it's easy to customize. And then afterwards, we'll also run it using a controller, which is part of the V2 framework in Hummingbot. The controller allows you to take advantage of the dashboard web app to do backtesting, and it's also set up that to allow you to deploy professionally, where you can deploy lots of instances, and each instance can deploy multiple controllers as well. All right, so first, let's go ahead and use Hummingbot. So recall from this 2.1 series, the first video was installation, where we installed Hummingbot, the command line version, as well as the dashboard version. So refer to that if you want to see how it works. So let's go ahead and use the command line version to first deploy a simple script version of the strategy. So the strategy we're going to deploy is this V2 directional RSI strategy. So the script for that is in the Hummingbot folder. So if you go to Hummingbot, GitHub/Hummingbot/Hummingbot, which is over here, the main Hummingbot GitHub repo, there's a scripts folder which has the basic kind of like starter scripts that help you understand various strategies. And so we'll be running the V2 directional RSI one. So let's walk through the script quickly before we kind of actually run it in Hummingbot. So the first thing is that you'll see that here's the kind of the architecture over here. Basically, every tick, this strategy will collect data from the candles exchange. This is exchange where it's going to fetch the data used to compute the signal. Then it will compute the signal, which the signal will be based on RSI, and then finally afterwards it will decide whether to enter into or exit the position. Let's do a quick tangent on RSI before we move on. So RSI is a signal that defines how overbought or oversold a parameter is. So we'll be running the strategy on Hyperliquid. So let's look at Hyperliquid. This strategy here, we can actually look at the indicator and find the RSI, relative strength index, and see how the RSI value is changing over time, based on this. So you can see that when it's high, it's typically when it's the price has gone up, and when it's gone down is when the RSI is lower. Obviously, the length of window, it also matters in calculating the RSI. So that's where the candles width parameter comes in. So here's all the parameters that we'll be defining in the strategy. You can see them in this config section at the very top of the script. So they are essentially the exchange and the trading pair where we'll be trading on, the exchange and pair where we're fetching the candle's data, the length of the candle. This is the time interval used. So this is the interval of the candle, 1 minute or 3 minute. Note that not all exchanges support all candles length, so you may want to check the candles feed directory to see which intervals the connector supports. In addition, the length is important because that defines the window used to calculate RSI. And then we're also going to define an RSI low or high. So the way this will work is that when the RSI low level is hit, that's an indicator that the RSI is lower, the price has gone down, and therefore might be a good entry point. Conversely, if the RSI high level is hit, then it's a signal the market might be overbought. And then that means that the price has gone up a lot, and that's a good time to short the market. Okay, so now that we understand how it works, and then finally there's the leverage and the position mode. Position mode is typically one way or hedge mode. And also these two only apply for perpetual exchanges. Okay, so now that we understand how it works, let's go ahead and set it up in Hyperliquid, and we can see that we can actually run the strategy on both a spot or a perpetual market. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the v2 RSI script using the command line version of Hummingbot. So this is the Hummingbot from source that we installed in the first video in the series. So I've already activated the Hummingbot environment, so I can go ahead and just type start in order to start the client. So I'll enter my password. That's used to encrypt the keys I've stored, and so let's do a quick balance check to see which exchanges I've connected and how much I have on each exchange. So yeah, so here's the OKX and the OKX perpetual connectors we added before. So now let's go ahead and add credentials for Hyperliquid as well as Hyperliquid perpetual. So okay, let's go ahead and find our Hyperliquid test account. This is a good time to say that this video is purely for demo purposes. Nothing that I show is investment advice or trading advice, and all the tokens and exchanges we use are purely for technical reference only. So in Hyperliquid here, I have my test Hyperliquid account, and so I have this is both a vault account and a non-vault account. So with Hummingbot, you can add an account and mark it to use the vault or the non-vault, and I'll show you how to do both. So here in Hummingbot, let's type the connect command, and then first we'll type Hyperliquid. So we can access Hyperliquid perpetual or Hyperliquid without that. So the one without is a spot market, and this is the perps market. So let's do the spot market first. The first thing we'll need is a private key for the wallet address we have associated with Hyperliquid. So currently this is my my address. So let me pull the private key I have over here and add it over here. And then here I can define whether I want to use vault address. So I'll put no here. And then so in this last step, I'll basically add this address over here. So I'll copy that. So basically, I would just use my main vault for Hyperliquid spot. This is not using the vault. So if I use a balance command, I can see the assets I have in Hyperliquid, which matches the balances I have here on the exchange. I also have a test vault over here. I think it's over here. So in this vault, I have, let's see, about 160 USDC in the perps account. So so let me go ahead and add that as the Hyperliquid perpetual connector. So over here in Hummingbot, I'll do Hyperliquid perpetual, and then this is the same private key that I had earlier. So I'll copy that over, and then here I do want to use the vault address, and so here instead of using my Arbitrum address, I will use the vault address instead, which is this one here. Oh, actually, sorry. Before I do that, I've encountered this error before. I believe that this adds a Hyperliquid, so I don't want to. I just want the address itself. So I'll do that, and so now, okay, so I'm connected, and if I check Hyperliquid perpetual, yep, that matches what I have here in the vault. So now I've successfully added credentials for Hyperliquid non-vault to Hummingbot, as well as for Hyperliquid perps yes vault to Hummingbot. And now I can run bots using one of these accounts. All right, so now that we've added credentials, let's go ahead and run the RSI directional strategy on Hyperliquid. So let's run it on Hyperliquid spot. We can run on both, but I think it'll be illustrative to run Hyperliquid spot. Afterwards, you can actually just change the config file and run the same strategy on Hyperliquid perp. And because it's using kind of candles to set the spreads and set everything, it should actually operate the same way. So first, we'll go ahead and create the script config for the v2 directional RSI. Let me expand this a bit bigger. Okay. And what this will do is this will define the parameters that the script uses. These are basically these are essentially the parameters, and you'll see that the questions that will be prompted match each of these over here. So first, exchange where the bot will trade. So I'll use Hyperliquid. The trading pair, we'll use Hype USDC because we have those are the assets we have on the exchange. If you use a perp exchange, then you have access to, of course, all the markets on the perp exchange. But because we're trading a spot exchange, we need to have these assets in order to trade them. Hummingbot does have the ability to use a separate exchange to calculate candles and trade on a different exchange. This can be useful if you're using a small exchange where it's not available, where the main exchange, where some market is not available, and you want to use information from a more liquid venue. Here, because we're using Hype, we want to actually use Hyperliquid, so we'll use Hyperliquid as a candle exchange and the same trading pair over here as well. So these are the number of candles used to the candle's length used to calculate RSI. So let's go ahead with use the default 60, and I think the interval here I believe is let's see is not prompted, but is 1 minute. So we could change this if we wanted to later on. So and then next we'll be entering in the lower bound and the upper bound for RSI. So the lower bound is if the RSI hits 30, then that'll be the long signal because it's a signal that the market's overbought. And conversely, if the market hits a 70 upper bound for RSI, it's a signal that the market's has gone too high and it's a good short entry point. And then finally, the amount in quote asset. Let's be a bit more conservative and only do 20 USDC here. Leverage, we can put anything here. This doesn't apply since we're trading on spot. And then finally, we'll be entering in the risk management parameters. Recall that these settings are what these come from the position executor, because this script, every time a position is created, is going to defer the risk management of that position to the executor. So let's just use these default settings for stop loss, take profit, and time limit here. So then finally, we can define a new a strategy name, a config file. So let's give it something we'll remember later on. Let's call it conf hyperliquid. Type and then hype. Okay, so we've created that config file, and then now we can start it by selecting the script and then selecting the config file that we just created, which was here. Okay, so it looks like it started, and then with Hummingbot, use the status command to see what's going on. I recently added this. This is actually on the development branch. So before the sample script didn't have any visualization, and now I just asked AI to help me add a quick little visualization. So now you can see where the current RSI is and where the long versus where the long and short signals are. And so long is 30, short is 70. Currently, the RSI is 39. And so if the RSI hits the lower bound, that's when we'll be entering the long position. And then vice versa, here we'll be entering into a short position. Because this is spot, if the upper bound is hit, it will trigger a sell of hype, and then also it would also set the take profit and stop loss and manage it like a normal position. And of course, we could stop this. Let's exit and see how we can apply this and run it on Hyperliquid Perpetual instead. So the easiest way to do this is to modify the config file. So let's go ahead and enter into our IDE. And then we can go ahead and look at the config file and modify the config file for the strategy. So here's the one that we just added. Let's make a copy of this. And let's make this called Hyperliquid Perp, and then we'll give it. Let's do it something like WIF. Okay. So here we'll be using the same script, and we'll keep everything the same, like RSI, candle length, everything else. But the only thing that will change are the exchange here and the trading pair. Actually, sorry, I'm gonna copy these changes. Actually, I want to make these changes over here. So Okay, so now we have a modified version of our original config file. This one simply changes the exchange to Hyperliquid perp and the trading pair to WIF USD. So so now let's go ahead and go back into Hummingbot with the start command, and now let's go ahead and run the same script with our new config. Because we have already added the Hyperliquid perpetual connector, this should be able to run the same strategy using a different exchange. So, okay, so it will be selecting this one here. Okay, so that's started. And let's go ahead and look at the status command again. And so now you can see, now it's running on Hyperliquid perpetual. It's using the USD balance we have there. And now it's also running this bot. And so currently the RSI is 41. And so it's not, so this is it's a good example of how you can take the same configuration, same strategy, and run it on different types of markets, spot or perpetual. And you can also run this on a different exchange if you want. So the behavior will be very similar. When the RSI triggers the lower bound, it will enter into a long position. When the RSI hits the upper bound, it will enter into a short position. And you can define you can change the long and the short parameters over here in the config file, or when you configure the script itself. So this script is now currently running, and we can still keep on using the status command or the status live command to monitor its how it runs. However, let's go ahead and look at a more professional version of the strategy, because right now this is just a simple strategy we've coded up in a simple script. However, we may want to do backtesting. And we may want to deploy the strategy across multiple pairs and across multiple instances. So that's what I think the dashboard is good at doing. So recall that in the first video, we installed Hummingbot, both the command line version from source, and we also used the deploy repo to install the dashboard. So we have dashboard running already. We can see like this. If we haven't, let's use Docker compose up. Actually, let's use the setup script, which is bash setup.sh, just in case. This will make sure that we have the latest versions of the broker, of backend API, and dashboard. So yes, now it's pulling those images. And so recall that what this will do is before we were running the command line version of Hummingbot. Now we'll have dashboard, and we'll use dashboard to backtest and create the configs, the same configs we were just editing earlier. But instead of deploying them directly, we will essentially spin up a new instance of Hummingbot, each of which were the same ones we were just analyzing, and then deploy each one using dashboard. So that'll be a more professional approach, because it will allow us to kind of like quickly deploy many bots in production, monitor them, and overall have a more advanced setup than just running an individual instance on our local computer. So it should be done pretty soon, and then we can go ahead and start running the dashboard. Okay, so it's pulled the new images, and it's started backend API, dashboard, and broker. So now we can go to the browser and go to localhost 8501. This is where the dashboard is based. So there's various instances here, as we recall. I've already added credentials to both Hyperliquid and Hyperliquid Perpetual here. So we could run it on those exchanges. However, note that currently for backtesting, we're still resolving some issues because these are newer exchanges. So we'll just do backtesting simply on OKX. For directional strategies, we can choose from a variety of different controllers, and we can choose from the Bollinger v1. So yeah, apology for the naming. We have MACD, BB, or Supertrend. So for what we'll do here, we're going to use the MACD BBV1 controller. So in terms of overall architecture, this one is very similar to how the V2 directional strategy script works, except that you're going to use the V2 framework. So the main difference between the V2 framework and the V1 scripts is that the V1 in the V2 framework, the script is simply a loader. It's loading. It's doing the same thing as other scripts, but instead of containing all the logic in the script file, it's instantiating individual controllers, and each controller may have its own configuration. So you can think of these controllers as kind of like individual strategies by themselves. However, the controller is more kind of more structured. That's what allows us to be backtested, because each controller is using a certain framework that we've designed the backtesting engine around. So one framework is directional trading, the other one is market making. So here we're using the directional strategy framework in order to create a controller, and that's what allows it to be backtested using dashboard. So here's the logical flow of the strategy. As you can see, it's very similar to the RSI script we were running earlier. We'll be fetching data from the candle exchange, computing the signal. This time the signal is not just based on one indicator, it's actually based on two. So to explain a bit more, let's take a look at kind of like we'll look at how this we'll get some intuition for how these two indicators interact with one another when we look at it in dashboard. But basically, we'll be using both the Bollinger band, where it is on the band, is it on the long side or short side, and then we're also going to be using the MACD to determine whether there's a crossover point to optimize the ideal entry point for a position. And just like the V1 script, when the position is created, it's using position executors in order to manage the risk of them afterwards. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up the MACD BB config generator here. As I mentioned earlier, we could use Hyperliquid, but because it's a new connector, backtesting, there may be some issues to resolve. We'll use OKX Perpetual as the exchange. Let's do WIF, just like the one that we're running currently on Hyperliquid Perpetual. And so we'll use WIF USDT, and we'll total amount quote 1,000, max XP per side. Let's do a little bit less, call it like 3. So that this defines the maximum number of positions you can maintain on each side of the book. And then we can also define the cooldown time. This is how often you refresh your orders if they are not filled. And then finally, hedge mode and candles and everything else. So we'll keep the rest of these parameters at the default, but you can read about them later on. And but what's nice about this is that we can actually visualize what's happening with the strategy. So this strategy is going to use two indicators, MACD and Bollinger bands, to determine long and short entry points. So the way it works is that for Bollinger bands is looking at the long threshold and the short threshold. So the long threshold is basically what is the lower bound where it would say that the market's oversold, and here is a good entry point. So for example, you can see one here, and you can see where the reason it's 0 is because it's 0. This green line is basically the 0 Bollinger band width. The same way that the short is over here, 1. And so basically, we actually don't see any short signals here, but if it should be on this line here if there were. But let's say we lower this. Let's say let's lower this to 0.8. We should be able to see. So now, do you see if we lower to 0.8, we see more of these red arrows, which indicates that these are now become plausible short signals. We're not plotting the max executors here, so the strategy will not place this many shorts. It will only place up to the max executors per side. Similarly, if we increase the long threshold, let's say to 0.1, we can see that more long entry points in the strategy. So this backtesting kind of really allows you to kind of visualize what the strategy is doing. We can also change the MACD, long and short, the fast and slow, and the signals. So all the technical indicators that are used to compute the signal can be configured over here. Once we're happy with this, we can also backtest. So here we're going to be fetching data from the exchange in the 1 minute resolution. So let's make sure this matches the resolution that we're using for the candles, and then we can also define a trade cost and a start and end date. So let's run this backtest over a 3-day period and see what the performance of this strategy would be. So this finished pretty fast because we're using a 3-minute resolution. If we had used a 1 minute resolution, it probably would have taken longer. So here are the stats. The blue line here is a price of WIF, I believe we're using WIF over this 3-day interval. The green lines are positions that we made money on, and the red ones are positions that we lost money on. So according to this backtest, this strategy would have actually done pretty well. It would have entered into 18 positions, 10 long and 8 short, and the backtest believes that it would have made money, and 9 of these are take profits. So this is pretty good. But let's go ahead and actually increase the resolution. Sometimes the resolution can really determine how this works. So let's use both the candles interval and the backtest interval here, and let's update the backtest and see if the 1 minute resolution matches the 3-minute resolution. So as I mentioned earlier, the 1 minute resolution takes a bit longer. As you can see, there's more finer grained detail here over here. Let's see. Actually, I need to run the backtest again. So now it's gonna run the backtest, and then hopefully we can see with more precision if there's a difference between the 1 minute backtest result versus the 3-minute backtest result. But this is just a quick example of the type of kind of iteration you can do with dashboard. You can see how now that this is a much more powerful tool than what we had earlier. So here's the results of the 1 minute backtest. It looks like this actually seems to confirm or at least back up what we said earlier with the 3 minute. This also is profitable and with quite a high accuracy rate. So this accuracy measures the percentage of winning versus losing trades that you deployed. So this actually looks pretty good. So let's deploy this strategy live now. So first we'll upload this configuration to backend API, and then we can change it. Note that here's a random name and a tag. Later on, if we wanted to, we could pull it up, this config, and edit it later on. So let's upload it, and now that's uploaded, it should be available in our deploy v2 tab over here, which is over here. So we've already added the OKX perpetual connector to credentials in. I will make sure to pull up the development image because this one matches kind of like what we're running also over there. Let's give it a descriptive name like test4, and and then we'll hit launch bot in order to launch the account, launch the bot. So now it's going to spin up a new Docker instance and deploy it, and it should be available in this instances tab over here once after a few seconds. So if you see this tab over here, it means the bot's running successfully. This will be updating metrics in real time, and if we want to, we can also look at the bot by typing docker ps and then attaching to the actual instance ID. So this is the same interface we saw earlier with the command line version, and we can also run the status command just like the other one in order to see the status of this bot. So now essentially we have two directional strategies running, both on the WIF token. One is on Hyperliquid perpetual over here. So here we're still waiting for a long entry point, and similarly we have another bot running on OKX perpetual, similar also on WIF, and this is now using the MACD BB strategy.